أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغنى عنه ماله وما كسب سيصلى نارا ذات لهب وامرأته حمالة الحطب في جيدها حبل من مسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. Traditionally, the last three chapters of the Holy Quran are taken up during the Dars of the last day, but I have also added the preceding short chapter, which is known as Surah Al-Lahab. And previously also I did it once, because according to Hazrat Aqdas Masih Maud alayhi, these four chapters are very closely related, and they also have a very strong and deep bondage with the ending verses of the Surah Fatiha. In fact, the last words of Surah Fatiha speak about al-Maghdub and al-Dallin, two categories of such unfortunate people who would have incurred wrath, not only of Allah, but also of the people. Al-Maghdub alayhi means those who are recipient of wrath. The subject is not mentioned, whose wrath. This opens up the subject and widens it to include not only the wrath of Allah, but also the wrath of the people. And this interpretation is fully supported by the Holy Quran, where it speaks that they returned not only with the wrath of Allah, but also with the wrath of people. The second unfortunate group which is mentioned is that of ad-dallin, which means those who went astray. According to Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi, the ending verses of Surah Fatiha are very strongly related, and in fact they control the subjects discussed with the last four surahs of the Quran. And according to Hazrat Masih Maud, Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab, which I'll translate shortly, is related to al-maghdub. It speaks of those who uh, have who are the recipients of wrath. And the remaining three surahs are in fact an exposition of the word ad-dallin. So the question arises, why all this is being repeated? The answer is should be very obvious and is very satisfying, that the last chapters of the surah of the Quran speak of the latter days, of the last days, the most important days, when great events would take place regarding the survival of Islam and regarding the ultimate defeat of the opponents. So they must have some relationship with the earlier history of what happened in the past and how God treated earlier such people who had incurred wrath and who had gone astray. So when the Holy Quran speaks of al-maghdub and al-dhalin, it speaks of them in two contexts. One with reference to the past, al-maghdub of the past, and al-dhalin of the past. And it makes amply clear that there were two unfortunate groups or categories of people whose history is made manifestly clear to you. Why were they called Maghdub? What was wrong with them? What were their acts and conducts which incurred both the wrath of Allah and the wrath of people? Now, this has been discussed all through the Quran in various ways, but it is not discussed just as a part of history. It is discussed as by way of warning that this is going to repeat once again, with reference to the Ummah of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as it happened with reference to the Ummah of Hazrat Moses alayhi salatu wasalam. So the mention of history is not just for our scholarly interest and satiation, our desire to know the past, but the history is preserved and very clearly uh, discussed in depth and in detail to give warnings regarding what the future may have in store for us. Likewise, ad-dhalin, that is to say those who went astray, is understood by all the Mufassirin to apply mainly to the Christians. Christians of that era, where they had started to deviate slowly but definitely from the path of truth, ultimately ending up in a concept of Christianity which had no relationship to the reality of Christ. There are two Christs. One image of Christ is that which is presented by the Holy Quran, which, according to us, and we have potent proof to support this view, is a real image of that of a prophet. That image of Christ, which is real, confirms with the sunnah of prophets so perfectly and mends with that sunnah so completely that it leaves no shadow of doubt that this Christ we are discussing is a person of history, a person of reality, who is a part of a long line of prophets of God who behaved alike, who were treated alike, and ultimately emerged victorious in the same way as earlier prophets had done. So, Christ of the Quran is the Christ of history. There is no shadow of doubt about it. There is no legend, no storytelling about it. Yet there is another Christ, and that image is the legend created by the 2000 years of the evolution of Christian thought. Evolution in the sense that it progressed into historical uh, passage of time from past to present time. So apparently it should be referred to as evolution. But in fact, to proceed in time does not necessarily mean that the thing is evolving. It may be degenerating with the passage of time. And the Holy Quran speaks of devolution as well as evolution. Surah Wateen is very clear about it. It says thus to hop along the waves of time does not mean that you're progressing. You're either progressing or retrograding or sinking deep into your past. So the correct word for the changes which were brought about by the Christian progress of thought is not evolution, in fact, but degeneration, reversion to the past, and joining those people who earlier had treated their religions like they treated Christianity now. The Holy Quran also speaks of this by pointing out that the Christians are not behaving in a new way. It's not something which has not happened in the past. The Holy Quran speaks of earlier people who also had invented Trinity. Earlier people who had also concocted legends out of the realities of history. And in that, Christians are following suit of those who had passed before them. So this is, in short, the introduction of Surah Lahab and the three following kuls, based on the expositions of the Quran by Hazrat Masih Maud. Surah Fatiha speaks of Maghdub and Dhalin, not just to inform you of your past and the history of mankind, but to warn you concerning your future and to warn you in time that before that this happened with the Ummah of Moses, and that happened at the time of Jesus Christ in relation to Jesus Christ. One is at the beginning, the other is at the end. Now, whatever happened at the time of Jesus in relation to the beginning of Judaism may be repeated in the history of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ummah. And this warning in further detail is now being carried and explained and dealt with in greater depth in the last four surahs which I have just mentioned. Now, I'll briefly dwell on the subject of Surah Al-Lahab and then pass on to the next three surahs. Al-Lahab, Tabbat Yada Abi Lahabin wa Tab, perish the two hands of Abu Lahab, and perish he. This translation is made in the form of a wish or a curse, but it can also be translated in the form of the past. The two hands of Abu Lahab did perish and were destroyed and severed and rendered useless and meaningless. Ma aghna anhu maluhu wa ma kasab. All his wealth could not stand by him and be of any use to Abu Lahab to save him from the ultimate destruction which was destined for him. Sayasla naran zata lahabin. He himself will enter the fire which he was building for others. Abu Lahab means the father of fire. So the best fate, the most appropriate fate for the father of fire would be to shove him into that fire. And that is exactly what the Holy Quran speaks of. Vamratuhu, and he would have a woman to support him. This is all metaphorical and figurative, you must remember. Hammalat al-Hatab, who would support his attempts to create disturbances in the world. The fire here mentioned is the fire of wars and troubles, international calamities, and so on, which are man-made calamities. Like wars are all man-made calamities. So fire has been mentioned in the Holy Quran in this context, and particularly here. This is the meaning of fire, the war which results in large-scale devastations. And actually, the modern warfare is the warfare by fire. Fire power is the real term, the actual term used in the modern times. So this surah is speaking of such wars where walls will become um, another name. What's the English term for that anyway? Synonym. A synonym for wars. Wars will become a synonym for fire, and fire will become a synonym for war. And actually, in the modern warfare, it is not the bullets which uh, create any danger for the enemy. It is the firepower. And the bullets also draw their destructive power from the fire uh, which is responsible for the explosions, small explosions. But the warfare is a story of explosion at a small scale or a large scale until you reach the scale of an atomic bomb and then go on to the scale of nuclear bomb and fusion bomb and so on and so forth. So there is some power which will create fire, which will create wars, and very destructive wars for that matter. In that power will be supported by some smaller nations, and who will build up the fuel for that fire. But the ultimate end of that people would be their own destruction through fire, and they'll be completely devastated by their own firepower. This is the message and essence of Surah Al-Lahab. And Hazrat Masih Maud describes it as, by divine guidance to be to be applicable to the Jews of the latter days. Now, this is no longer history we are discussing here. With reference to the Jewish history of the past, having known their fixed ways and conduct with relation to other people of the world, God tells us that they misbehaved not only in their religious conduct, but also misbehaved to the people in general. As such, they incurred wrath both of God and of people. But in the latter days, their plan will be far more destructive and far more spread out, covering almost the entire world, or in fact the entire world. So their end will also come in relation to their threat to the world peace and the survival of human race. The natural result would be that they will cease to be from then on as a real power on earth. That will be the last of their attempt to destroy the peace of earth. But they will work through whom? Who will be the Hammalat al-Hatab? They are the Christian powers, which are being discussed in the following 3 chapters. Because Dallin are those who will be used as instruments by the Jewish powers to attain their goals of worldwide supremacy through wars, through subjugation of smaller people. So their influence on the world will be of twofold. One, they would work through the Christian powers against mainly the Muslim Ummah and Islam and subjugate the rest of the world, because the Imra, the woman, which is figuratively mentioned here, to support their efforts to create wars and destructions, is in fact a figurative word for smaller nations. And unfortunately, this may also apply to some Muslim nations of Middle East, like you have already seen in the immediate past. In the Middle East crisis known as the crisis of Gulf War, what happened was that 9 perhaps of the Middle Eastern Muslim powers completely supported the plan of the Jewish people through the Christian powers to destroy the world of Islam and to destroy the Middle Eastern powers as such. Now, Hablum min Masad suggests that they are the people particularly being mentioned in this verse, because Masad is a rope which is made out of the bark or the leaves of date trees. Date palms go towards the making of the rope which is called al-masad. So the dates have a very positive and strong relationship to Middle Eastern countries. So the punishment which is mentioned here is a punishment of their own doing. And that is a very interesting phrase used here, and it goes beautifully well with the entire style of the whole surah. The creator of fires will be shoved into fire, and those nations who will support by providing them wood will be hanged by the product of the same trees. That is to say, they will create their own enslavery by their own hands, and they will be enslaved by these people, and they will have no power to wriggle out of that dilemma and that crisis, and their bondage would be that of their own doing. This, unfortunately, is the stage which has already reached, and many a great Arab scholar has already started viewing the whole exercise of Gulf War in exactly the same way as I am describing to you. A recent article appeared of an interview of Heikel, Professor Heikel, who was the most famous journalist that Egypt or the whole Arab world has produced in the recent time, who speaks very clearly on these terms, that the entire crisis which the Arabs are facing today are of their own making. They have themselves gone completely and permanently under the bondage of the great powers of the world, and there is no way to get out of it. So this is the import of this very tragic surah mentioned here, which unfortunately we are seeing being fulfilled with our own eyes. The 3 surahs, according to Hazrat Masih Maud which follow, deal with Christianity, because they speak about Dhalin. And Dhalin, you know, are understood by the unanimous opinion of the Muslim scholars to refer to the history of Christians as they deviated from the truth to their own devious ways. The first surah, according to Hazrat Masih Maud which follows, which is Surah Al-Ikhlas, is the main surah, which commands the following 2 surahs. Christianity and the various dangers emanating from Christianity to the Muslim world and to the world at large are discussed in detail in the following two surahs, but essentially they have been mentioned with reference to Christianity in this surah, which is Surah Al-Ikhlas. Hazrat Masih Maud speaks of Surah Al-Ikhlas as an antidote to Christianity. In this way, Christianity is discussed not in this negative way, but we are told how to avoid being targeted by Christianity and its dangers. So, in this way, by implication, Christian faith is discussed, but a warning which also bears a glad tiding of possible routes of escape. So these are the possible routes of escape which are mentioned here, but let's discuss it verse by verse and find its internal relationship and the central message. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful. Say or declare, O Prophet of God, which is implied and not mentioned in so many words, addresses towards Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he is asked to convey this message from God to the entire world. But Hazrat Masih Maud says, particularly and primarily to the Christians, declare to them, God is one. One in the sense that the thought of God, the concept of God, does not permit you to entertain the concept of duality in any way. The word ahad applies to a person who is one, who does not have a following two. Wahda, on the other hand, is a word to denote oneness in Arabic, which automatically raises the concept of a second one and a third one and a fourth one. But when you speak of ahad, it means unique, the only one. So it rules out positively and categorically the possibility of three gods being in one. There is one and only one God. Now this oneness is further explained in the following verses of the same surah. And it's a beautifully interrelated and interconnected subject which is being discussed from here onward. One, when somebody is one, it can also speak of his helplessness. He has no one to support him. When somebody wants to create pity among others, to seek their help, he says, I am alone. There is no one in the world to help me. And unfortunately, in our country, when they have to invoke pity to the utmost, they say, I am so much alone that I have no one except God to support me. As if this is a matter of utter helplessness, which means God is practically nothing to them. They don't say, I'm not alone because God is with me. They say, I'm so much lonely and helpless that I have left nothing but God. So please help me. God can't. But that idea of helplessness is, of course, invoked by the word ahad. So this should be answered. And the answer follows in the second verse most beautifully. Allahu Samad. Samad is the one thing on which everything else depends. And it does not depend on anything else. It draws its meaning from a scenario where a rock, a huge, lofty, proud rock, is in the midst of inundation and flooding, and everything else has been drowned and sunk, and only that proud rock stands aloft. and the birds and the animals and human beings, if they are there, everything which wants to survive seeks the support of that rock for the survival, or it will be destroyed. So oneness in might, oneness in glory, oneness not that of helplessness, but oneness of hope for the rest of the world, hope for the support and survival of the remaining, all that remains. And it also speaks of why there are so many other things than so many things other than God. Oneness, yet there are so many other things. So As-Samad explains this. As-Samad says that oneness does not mean that God is alone. It means that God is the only being on whom the existence is supported, on whom all forms of existence depend. If He were not there, there will be nothing. You can't say that if there were no God, then we will be left godless. The natural corollary of this verse is, if there were no God, there would be nothing. As Ghalib says, na tha kuch to khuda tha, kuch na hota to khuda hota. If there were nothing, still there would be God. Na tha kuch to khuda tha. When there was nothing, there was God. So As-Samad speaks of that singleness of God, which is not a scenario of His helplessness, which does not paint a scenario of His helplessness, but paints a scenario of His being the only source of support and survival for all that appears to be other than God. So there is in fact nothing other than God. Everything depends on Him, and if He were not, there would be nothing. Now this verse also gives a lie to the Christian view that there is Jesus Christ to support God, to be with Him and along with Him, be at one with Him. The Holy Quran refutes this view in this As-Samad, which means that if God were to destroy everything else, still there would be God left. And this argument is explained in another verse with reference to Jesus Christ. Now, the verse I have in mind is this: لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْمَسِيحُ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ. Those who claimed that إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْمَسِيحُ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ, God is nothing but Jesus Christ Himself. That is to say, there are two persons, but yet the same. Three in one is being described with reference to Jesus Christ's concept in Christianity. قُلْ فَمَنْ يَمْلِكُ مِنَ اللَّهِ شَيْئًا إِنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يُهْلِكَ الْمَسِيحَ ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ وَأُمَّهُ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. Respond to them by saying, who can save them from God? يَمْلِكُ مِنَ اللَّهِ شَيْئًا, here it indicates, is used in the sense of saving them, who can support them, who can defend them from God. In arada an yuhlikal masih ibn Maryam wa ummuhu. If God so decided to destroy Masih and his mother Mary. وَلِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. God is the sole sovereign, the only sovereign of the heavens and the earth and what is in between them. يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ. He creates what He likes, but He does not beget. وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. God is powerful to do whatever He so pleases. Now, here is a very interesting proposition, but it does not mean that God would destroy Jesus Christ. It's a hypothetical proposition, and here the halakat does not mean death only. Halakat here means total annihilation, because when this verse was revealed, Jesus and his mother had both already died. So God is not taking up the issue with Christianity on a controversial matter. We know him to have died. The Holy Quran declares them both to have died, but Christians may have disputed this. So God has raised this question hypothetically. And also it means that if they are alive, that is to say in some form, it is because of God, because God is Samad, not by themselves. But if Allah so decided to destroy them, to annihilate them from existence, to make them as if they were not, then who could stop God from doing this? This is the message. Now, hypothetically, if you ask a Christian, if you destroy, if there were no Jesus, what would they be? This is the question posed to them. If there is a Jesus and God decides to destroy him, what will happen to God? Will he remain complete without him or not? If not, then they are one person within two parts. If God remains alone, complete, without Jesus, then he is a single person other than Jesus. Otherwise, they can't be two persons at all. If there are 2% and you destroy one person, then you maintain your own individual personality. But if by destroying another person, you also commit suicide of a sort, then in fact there are no two persons. So it amounts to a very potent argument against Christian belief that despite the fact they are two, they are still one. They can't be one. And again, the mother is also spoken of because of some sects in Christianity who speak of divinity of Mary. Although some scholars try to create the impression that Holy Quran speaks of Mother of Mary as if Christians believed in the deity of Mary, in the divine quality of Mary, but it is not so. They are wrong. The Holy Quran knows about the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Quran speaks of the Holy Spirit as a third part to the so-called party of God. But the Holy Quran also speaks of some sects of Christianity which still exist. And the question of divinity of Mary is still being discussed. Now, this hypothetical question is not by way of diminishing, by way of ridiculing Jesus Christ or in any way insulting him, because the same argument is presented with reference to Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is the style of the Holy Quran to speak of the loftiness of Allah's unity. Before that, everything else is just nothing. قُلْ أَرَأَيْتُمْ إِنْ أَهْلَكَنِيَ اللَّهُ وَمَن مَّعِيَ أَوْ رَحِمَنَا فَمَن يُجِيرُ الْكَافِرِينَ مِنْ عَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ قُلْ هُوَ الرَّحْمَنُ وَآمَنَّا بِهِ وَعَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْنَا فَسَتَعْلَمُونَ مَنْ هُوَ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ Surah Al-Mulk, verses 29-30. O Prophet, declare to them, أَرَأَيْتُمْ إِنْ أَهْلَكَنِيَ اللَّهُ وَمَن مَّعِيَ. Don't you see that if God so decided to destroy me and whoever is with me. Now, the apparent uh, consequence of this should be, then what can we do about it? But the inference drawn from this is a very interestingly different inference, and this is what I want to point out here. Number one, if God so decided to destroy Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a hypothetical question as in relation to Jesus Christ. It does not mean that God would ever think of destroying him, nor did it mean that God would ever think of destroying Jesus Christ. So they are both hypothetical questions. But the Holy Quran speaks of the grandeur and the majesty of God in this sense that he is above everything else. If he so decided to destroy everything, then the inference is فَمَنْ يُجِيرُ الْكَافِرِينَ مِنْ عَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. What will save them, save the non-believers, infidels, from a grievous punishment, a painful punishment from Allah? Which means that if the best is destroyed, the worst has no way out. Even if the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ were not there, the enemies of Islam would suffer a very grievous end, and nothing can save them from that. So their wishing ill of Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not avail them of anything. Their destruction is not a hypothetical question. It's a question of a decree of God. And the destruction of Prophet Muhammad as they wish is just a hypothetical question, and it does not hurt God any if there were only he and nothing else was left. And then it speaks of the humility of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as God himself teaches him with relation to him himself. قُلْ لَا أَمْلِكُ لِنَفْسِي نَفْعًا وَلَا ضَرًّا إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ. Tell them, I own nothing by myself which could be of my advantage or disadvantage. So this is perfect unity of God, which is proclaimed by the Holy Quran and explained by the Holy Quran with reference to Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he is the loftiest in our understanding of the goal of universe. He is the ultimate. So if he is taught this perfect humility with reference to God, then whatever remains must learn humility, must know that if Prophet Muhammad has that humble relationship to his master, the God, and he stands nothing in relation to him if Allah did not desire to give him a lofty station, then who are we? Who are the rest of the world? They're nothing. So here, with reference to the same verse of halakat, this in fact means that if Prophet Muhammad was not to be there, then there would be nothing else. Everything else would be completely destroyed. And until that happens, the question of making Prophet Muhammad go into nothingness does not arise. But because he will never end, because he is everlasting with his God, made everlasting with his God, so there is also a glad tidings for the rest of the universe and the rest of the creation. We live forever in some form, not because of our own values, but because of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we will live by him and with him and in him. This is the answer to the Christian metaphor of the similar words. We first must live with Prophet Muhammad, by Prophet Muhammad, in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then will be eternalized like he has been eternalized by God. So the message of Qul Huwallahu Ahad is complete and perfect and leaves no loophole for any other being. Even Prophet Muhammad is being discussed in terms of if God so decided to destroy him. Who can stop this? So Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. God is the only source of survival. Samad also means this. When everything else is drowned, the birds and even the smallest ants and the biggest animals like elephants, they can only survive on one single rock which is standing aloft above the water surface. So God is Samad. If everything is destroyed, yet those will not be destroyed who seek shelter with God, who seek His support and who are granted His support. And in this sense, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those who follow him are given a glad tiding. Lam yalid walam yulad. He did not give birth to anyone. Walam yulad. Nor was he given birth by anyone else. So here, the reference to Christianity is obvious. Allahu Samad, God is the only source of survival and the only source of support for existence. Lam yalid, he never gave birth to anyone. Walam yulad, and was never created. Now God is extending the discussion of the supremeness and oneness of God into time. Up to now we were discussing the present. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad. Samad, up to Samad, we are discussing the present. Lam yalid walam yulad now speaks of God's supremacy with reference to time. He never gave birth to anyone because his survival is not dependent on the survival of his species. He has no species other than he himself. And because he is indestructible, so he does not have to give birth to anyone. Walam yulad, nor was he ever created by anyone, because he is everlasting. And because he is everlasting, so he could not have a father, which means if Jesus has a father, he could not be everlasting. So this verse completely destroys the hocus pocus of Christianity. Walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. It means that not only that God is without a child, without an issue, without a parent, he is unique in himself, he is the source of support for the whole universe, and he is single, indivisibly single, but also walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Even by accident, like of him was never created, it never happened. So if you speak of God as having these qualities and yet conceive of another person like him, then his unity will be destroyed. So the last part of this surah, that verse, وَلَمْ يَكُلْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, means that his unity is not only universal in space but also universal in time. Never like of him existed. And his alone is in attributes. Now, because of the shortage of time, we're always left short of time when we're discussing these surahs. I always bring rolls of notes to discuss various interesting aspects of the surahs, but always I'm left short of time. So somebody should note from the notes. I'll hand them over to you. Whatever has been discussed, you keep that aside, but part of that will have to be discussed again because some points are left out. And from we'll start the next dars inshallah next year from the remaining notes. Now I'll very briefly, we have only about an hour left now, discuss the remaining surahs. 40 minutes? All right. We'll divide it, the prayer time would need about 30 minutes, at least. So we have only hardly 10 minutes left. Is it right? قل أعوذ برب الفلق أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. Briefly speaking, according to Hazrat Masih Maud, after Surah Ikhlas, we discuss of the purity of God's oneness in total with excellent, absolute beauty and perfection. God speaks of the dangers to his oneness from Christianity, which speaks of Trinity of God. So first of all, the concept of Christianity is uprooted from its foundations in Surah Ikhlas, completely and totally and for all times to come. Then whatever myth is left behind is mentioned to still pose some dangers. Not the reality of Christianity, because the reality is gone overboard after we read Surah Ikhlas. But the myth of Christianity still poses dangers. And the Holy Quran warns us very clearly, in depth and in detail, against those dangers. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. Say, أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. I want to seek shelter from Allah, who is Rabbul Falaq. Falaq has different connotations. It means also the splitting of things, like splitting of day from darkness, splitting of a seed in the sense of it giving new birth. So min sharri ma khalaq means that God has created everything for a good purpose, but at the time of birth, death in some form is always attendant. It can create deformities, it can miscarry the purpose of birth in so many ways. So I seek Allah's shelter from the process of creation, because in the process of creation, light is created as well as some parts which are unfortunate not to receive light. Similarly, all that is created for the benefit, when you are in shadow from the benefit, you are enveloped in a sort of darkness, which is what the import of the surah is, to save you, to warn you against the dark shadows of creation. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. God directly has not created anything harmful. So the first verse explains the meaning of the second verse. You can only be led into dangers if the first part of the verse is not applicable. And then the creation has two options for you. All creations have an option of escape into the creation of God to save yourself from destruction, and an option to run away from the refuge in God into your total annihilation and destruction. So min sharri ma khalaq means God has created everything for good and for positive things. But those who fail to benefit from the goodness of things, for them is a warning that they will benefit in a negative way from the process of creation, and they will invite their own destruction. مِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبَ. Ghasiq is like night, when it covers everything and the darkness prevails. So this speaks of an age of which already Surah Al-Ikhlas has discussed the possibility, this possibility of Christianity covering the entire world. This is mentioned as a sort of darkness covering the whole world, bringing a total night to the world. Because Christianity will lead people against the unity of God, against the pure unity of God, into many dangers inherent upon those beliefs. من شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. That will be a time when these forces which will be responsible for the setting of a very dark night, a dark age on the people, in the name of light, of course, they would pose the greatest danger to the survival of mankind. من شر غاسق إذا وقب من شر النفاثات في العقد. They will destroy the world by creating differences, by splitting the world into parts. Nafasat fil uqad has many meanings. One of them is this, that they breathe with ill intentions into knots and ties. They unknot ties. They break people from people. They create splits and divisions among the people. And to divide and rule is in fact an excellent translation of this verse. I mean, one of the translations would be those who divide and rule. So this is the Christian philosophy, or the Western philosophy you can say, but which is dominated by Christianity. So ultimately we can say this is a Christian philosophy of dominating the entire world through causing divisions and creating splits and ruling them with the help of those divisions and splits. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And we seek shelter of Allah from the one who is envious, when he envies. Now this is a very strange ending to this surah, when everything has been taken over by the dark ages of Christianity, not of the light, the illuminating ages of the early part, but the dark ages of Christianity, when apparently there is nothing left. Then why does this surah end like this? وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. What is left there to envy about? This obviously refers to a subject discussed in another surah, which is Surah Wal Asr. Wal Asr innal insana lafi khusrin. I bear witness, I bring to witness that age which will be the age of loss in entirety. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. The entire age will be the age of darkness and loss, except a small exception of those people who will believe truly, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and act righteously. They are an exception. So this is Ahmadiyyat. This is the new movement of revival of Islam, of redemption of Islam from the clutches of Christianity and all other antagonist forces. So you are those who are mentioned here, and you are a minority, a small helpless minority. So if you achieve anything, you will create jealousies all around you, and jealousies are always harmful, even if the jealous is weak. But when the jealous is powerful and strong, then nothing can save the poor fortunate person who causes envies and creates envies because of his being fortunate. So you need very much a prayer for your protection. Unless you seek Allah's protection and obtain it, there is no question of your survival. So we must remember that we survive only on the mercy of Allah. By ourselves, we have nothing. We have those qualities which create envies. We do not retain that force which protects those qualities. That force of protection, that power of protection, will only come from Allah. So this is why the whole verse is speaking in the form of prayers. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ وَمِنْ شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبَ وَمِنْ شَرِّ النَّفَّثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ وَمِنْ شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ. So let that suffice for the time being. Have we reached the end of the 15 minutes already? A few more minutes. Okay. No. The end of the 15 minutes which I allotted for the remaining two surahs. Yes. Now to return to Surah An-Nas, briefly, of course. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ. What a beautiful interrelationship. The Surah Ikhlas is directly addressed against Trinity. And in this surah, three aspects of God are discussed in one. Rabbun Nas, Malikin Nas, Ilahin Nas, not three persons in one, but one having three fundamental attributes. These will be divided into three persons by the Trinity of Christ. This is the danger to which this surah warns us and forewarns us and arms us. Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas. It says the ultimate byproduct of Christianity will be a threefold danger of annihilation of mankind. That threefold danger would be directly related to the Trinity, the three parts of Christianity. They will speak of Rabbun Nas as separately from Malikin Nas, and Malikin Nas as separately from Ilahin Nas, in the sense that they will, without right, appropriate the Rububiyyat and snatch it away from God. That is to say, apparently they will do that. They will claim to be the Rabb of the people, those on whom the rest of the world survives for their sustenance. They will be the new claimant of Rububiyyat. So, O Prophet Muhammad, and advise and warn your people, your followers, to seek Allah's refuge from these false Rabbs, and tell them to remember that only there is one Rabb and no other Rabb. That is Allah, the God and of Prophet Muhammad, and the God of the universe. وَقُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ. And this trial of the latter days, which will emerge from Christian thoughts and Christian concept of religion, would lead to a second danger, which is Malikin Nas. They will claim that they are the ultimate sovereigns of this universe. They will accept no other sovereignty. This has reached its culmination already. Previously, the world of Christianity was divided into two parts. The Christianity gave birth to atheism. And it was the atheist child of Russia and communist world was an offspring of Christianity, because when you analyze Christianity with wisdom and understanding, there will be nothing left in it. Already it has proved to be a myth. So atheism is another name of Christianity. And in its essence, Christianity in its form is atheism. You delve deeper into the Christian view and dogmas, and you'll end up into nothing. So the Western world gave birth to another child of Christianity that acquired atheism as its faith and its motto, its driving force. And that atheism resulted in the empire of USSR and the dependent allies. So Surah Qul A'udhu Birabbin Nas, Malikin Nas, Malukiyat is being discussed, sovereignty. So the sovereignty of the world got divided into two parts. Both were Christian children. The Christian Western world and the atheist Eastern world were both the offsprings of Christianity. So Ilahin Malikin Nas, Malukiyat were almost entirely misappropriated by Christianity. They emerged as the sovereigns of the world. So God reminds the Muslims that as you believe in the real sovereign to be God himself and none other, so you can acquire sovereignty only through him. There is no way out except to turn to God. There is no way out except to turn to God to re-snatch the powers of survival on earth through building your economies. Don't turn to Christians. Christian economies are misappropriation of the entire resources of the world by a wrongful people. You must turn to God and remember, Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq. No, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas. God is the provider of the people. But they would have acquired a sort of godhood in claiming to be the providers, the aid givers. The survival of the third or rest of the world depends on them. So God is the provident, and by praying to him and by understanding the message of this surah, you must return to the ultimate unity of God. Only by that return you can survive in this world. God is indivisible, but he has three attributes, which three attributes have been attempted to be divided and misappropriated by the Christian rise. The attribute of Rububiyat has been taken over by them. They feed the world, this they claim. And practically the world seems to be dependent upon them for the survival. And then they are the supreme sovereigns of the world. Falsely so. God reminds us only God is the sovereign. And if you seek sovereignty again, you must achieve it through God, by turning to him and by no other way. Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas. And they have also they have also snatched away, apparently, Godhead from God. They have created a false God for you to worship him. O Prophet, remind your people and remind the whole world that Allah is the only God worthy of worship. He has no partner, no Christ, no anything else, but he alone in his purity. So the message of Qul huwallahu ahad, the surah from which we started, has become consummate and is discussed in greater detail in the last surah. There are so many things which I brought this evening to discuss here about these most wonderful surahs, which in fact are essence of the Holy Quran, particularly that essence which relates to the present age. But because of shortage of time, we must finish it now. and turn to the other subject, that is of prayer, the last departing prayer of the reviving moments of Ramadan. English phrase speaks of the dying moments. I always speak of Ramadan is passing away as the last reviving moments of Ramadan. Even if we are fortunate to benefit from one single moment of this month, the last breath of Ramadan will be revived forever. So let's end up in prayer that may Allah help us receive all the benefits of Ramadan, if not so far, in the remaining blessed moments. This is my belief that even if you get the benefit of a single moment of Ramadan in full by turning to God, then that single moment can be the means for your survival from then on. It will take you up. It will not transform you immediately, but it will sow the seed of ultimate transformation in you. And it will take you over completely. And then you will ride in the lap of the Holy Quran like a child, because these three surahs are the very gist of the Holy Quran, as Surah Fatiha is the gist of the Surah of Holy Quran in the beginning. That is one single gist, and this gist is explained and divided in three parts in the end. And why three parts? Because it addresses Christianity. And there are three major dangers to the survival of truth and survival of spiritual world for man. They will come to you from Christianity. So in a beautiful way, instead of discussing the subject of Christianity in one single surah, God has divided the discussion in three parts, like Christianity is already divided in three parts. So it's a most beautiful handling of the subject which we have entered. So let's turn to pray to Allah, and let me remind you of so many prayers which we should seek from Allah. First of all, as has been the wont of earlier caliphs than I must remind you of those who have contributed towards Tehreek-e-Jadid and fulfilled their promises by this time. Previously, the number was small, and their lists were being read out. Now it has grown into so many thousands. It is impossible for me to read out the whole list, but I'll only mention a few Jamaats which have done beautifully well in this area. And on the top stands out the Jamaat of Karachi. As a country, Pakistan leads the list, of course. 42,671 contributors who have made promises have fulfilled their promises already. It's a great number with the grace of Allah. As compared to the last year, the Ahmadi, Mukhlisin Ahmadi, who had fulfilled their promises of Tehreek-e-Jadid by this time of the year, was 32,259. So very sizable jump forward with the grace of Allah. Among the Jamaats of Pakistan, Karachi stands first. Last year, there were 2,259 Ahmadis in Karachi who had fulfilled their promises of Tehreek by this time. This year, the number, let me see, can you imagine? 7,160, almost three times. A great leap forward with the grace of Allah, and Jamaat Karachi must be congratulated by all the Jamaats of the world for this most beautiful achievement. May they go a long, long way in setting examples and pace for the rest of the world. Then come, country-wise, Indonesia, mashallah. It has taken lead over Germany. Germany always vied with the Jamaats of Karachi and Pakistan and was second contestant in the race. In this regard, this time Indonesia has taken over in a neck-to-neck race. In Germany, those who have already fulfilled their promises number 2,655. In Indonesia, 2,659. So only a lead of 4, which means not a lead by a neck, but a lead by a breath or a part of nose. But still a lead, of course. Canada has come up in the list very high with the grace of Allah, and the number who have fulfilled their promises is 1988. Then comes UK, unfortunately, for UK. Last year they were quite high in the ladder, but this time they have slid down. That means that I've always pointed out, Ahmadis never go bad to worse, you know. They always become better and better and better. It is the people responsible for in administration sometimes who individually show signs of weaknesses. And the Jamaat is never to be blamed. This is my long experience with the Jamaat. You bring up a good administrator, a devoted, dedicated administrator, an administrator who believes in prayer and seeks help from Allah through prayers, always leads an apparently rotten Jamaat to a most beautiful, healthy Jamaat and most productive Jamaat. So this also applies individually to various sections of the Jamaat's activities. Then comes India with 920 who have fulfilled. So we must remember them in our prayers. How many minutes are left? 9 minutes. Now I think I'll just read briefly the list of the points which we must remember in prayer, and as I read them, you pray along with me. We must say durood, send durood to Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, our benefactor and the benefactor of the past as well as the people of the future. The benefactor in the sense that if it were not meant to be created, then the exercise of creating universe would be absolutely meaningless. He is a benefactor of the past and benefactor of the future. So we must remember him in our durood and salam. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah al-Azim, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin. Then we must remember in prayer, and you keep on praying them in your heart, for the Sulhai Ummat, all the holy people up to this time, including Hazrat Masih Maud Wasalam and the holy people which are created in his sub-era, the sub-era of the larger part of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's era. Alam-e-Islam, the world of Islam, stands in grave dangers which are ripening now. And even those who first pooh-poohed the warnings issued by Ahmadis are now realizing how grave the dangers are becoming. They themselves are the architects of those dangers. But the situation is very, very grave. We must intensify our prayers for Alam Islam. Let's go on praying in the heart as I mention these categories. Then we must pray to Allah for saving us from the fitna at Dajjal. The dangers to the very survival of truth posed by the rise of Christianity in the form of a religion and in the form of a world might, a mighty power of earth. So we must seek Allah's forgiveness and Allah's shelter from these dangers. We must remember the peace of the world in our prayers. We must remember that we have been raised by Allah to spread Islam and to make it emerge victorious once again. We, the small, insignificant people, however much we may try, we do not have that power, that strength in us. If you logically analyze our qualities and whatever we possess, we're nothing. So only through prayer we can seek Allah's help, and if He so decides, then inshallah we will turn the fate. We'll be the people who will bring about a great revolution in the earth and turn death into life once again. For the peace of the world in general, for opening for us new avenues for preaching in the world and giving us new strength, new ideas, new power of implementation, and strength and willingness to persevere in our pursuit of the spread of Islam and truth. Those who have dedicated their lives and are working with the Jamaat, those who have not yet been called, but they are always ready to serve at a call, those who have not formally dedicated their lives, but who live like dedicated persons. There are thousands of such people, hundreds of thousands in fact, who are devoted to the spread of Islam and the cause of truth, but who have not officially dedicated their lives, so they should also be included in that. Those who have joined the plan of Waqf-e-Naw, remember the Waqifin-e-Naw, those children who have been, I believe, destined to play a very important and crucial role in the last battle between truth and falsehood, between Islam and Christianity. These are your innocent children you have offered by way of sacrifices to Islam, so remember them also in your prayer. Shuhadai Ahmadiyyat, those who have given up their lives, those martyrs of Ahmadiyyat, go on remembering, as I call them. I am also becoming prayer personified. When I take up their name, my heart melts for them, and the very name turns into prayer. Asirane Rahe Maula, who are still suffering from the imprisonments and other bondages in Pakistan and some other places, just because they have responded to the call of the Messiah of the time, but for no other crime. Tamam Jamaat Ahmadiyya Alamgir, all the Jamaats of the world, some of them are rising and awakening, some of them have not yet responded so well so far. So let's pray for all. We are so small in number. If a part of us still keeps sleeping, that will be a great loss to the world. We must wake up. Otherwise, the rest of the world will sleep into its death. Asirane Rahe Maula, those who have lost their freedom just for the crime of attempting to liberate the world from the bondage of Satan. All the Ahmadis of the world, individually and collectively as Jamaats, those who suffer from various problems. There are people among them who are ill, terminally ill or seriously ill. There are people among them who are suffering under the cruelties of other fellow human beings. And the number is rising, unfortunately, in this world. Man is now being targeted by man so widely at national levels as well as individual levels, that if you analyze the suffering of man, it is because mainly of the ill in man. That is why we were taught the prayer min sharril waswasil khannas. The khannas, the Satan, leads man into evil thoughts and evil plans, which ultimately destroy the peace of man himself. let's remember those who are ill, even the terminally ill, must be prayed for because it's up to God. Whenever He so decides, He can make anyone revive from the near death. From the ultimate death, He will revive only in the hereafter. From the near death, He can revive here on earth whenever He so decides. Those who are under heavy debts of any sort, those who have family problems, those who are widowed, and those who are left orphans, and such people who are like orphans, the third world particularly. Remember, the third world, it has gone into a sort of an orphanage like never before. Previously, they had created a false god in the form of communist world. They always ran for shelter and help and succor to this false god. God has destroyed that false god. Only one false god of Trinity is left in the field now. So that false god has become far more cruel than ever before. And as such, these people have been rendered totally helpless. If we not seek prayer for them, there will be nothing to whom they can turn for survival. Yet they do not turn to you for survival. But we have been taught by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that even if those who turn away from him, he has taught us uh, that ultimate in nobility, that even those who turn away from you and run towards their ultimate total destruction, you must pursue them and try to save them from that annihilation. Then I turn to the widows, the orphans, the widowed people, the widowed orphaned nations. कितना है? हो गया? अच्छा. So Azan can be delayed for a few moments, and let's continue. And those who have been supplied with something to eat, they can start breaking their fast. Please, let's continue for a few minutes more. And हो गया? Let's break the fast during the dars. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma laka sumtu wa ala rizqika aftartu. So we must remember those who are involved in family feuds, sufferings, man-made sufferings. They themselves are responsible, but they are living a hell instead of living a heaven on earth. The widows and the orphans, such Ahmadi girls who do not find a suitable match for them and growing old, causing concern to their parents and well-wishers and also themselves heavily suffering. Those who have not been gifted by issues by God so far, students of all sorts, of all fields, those who are without employment and without means of livelihood, for those who who are indulged, who are involved in various trades, businesses, etc., for the farmer community, those who are involved in various lawsuits, for particularly for Qadian and the Darweshan-e Qadian, and for Rabwa and Ahle Rabwa, because of all the cities of the world today who belong to the second movement of survival of Islam, which is after Mecca and Medina, stand Qadian and Rabwa. And those who live there and are responsible for the survival of values attached to these two noble places, they deserve our special prayers. Then for students of all sorts, those who have not been blessed with children issue so far, for people who, um, for the people, their businesses and commerce, etc., for farmers of all sorts, for those who are implicated in lawsuits, rightly or wrongly, for people of Qadian and people of Rabwa in particular, people of Pakistan in particular as well as in general as compared to people of Qadian and Rabwa, all the Ahmadis of the world, wherever they live, for mankind who is suffering so miserably and smarting under the pain which is man-made itself. For Tehreek-e-Jadid, those who have participated in the sacrifices of Tehreek-e-Jadid and other contributions towards Jamaat, this is a unique Jamaat, you must remember, which stands alone in the entire world in creating a system of financial sacrifice, which is based on the teachings of the Holy Quran and the teachings of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but those teachings have become consummate in the form of Ahmadiyya today, as it had never consummated in the form of a regular system, a permanent system of financial sacrifices. Remember the whole Jamaat and the various ibtilas, that is to say trials, which are imposed on us from outside or imposed on us from within us. Remember particularly the Jamaats which are forward in offering sacrifices for the survival of Islam and for the revival of Islam. Remember Hazrat Masih Maud that you do when you say send durood to Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his al. You always, not always, but most Ahmadis also remember of Hazrat Masih Maud because he stands first in his spiritual al. So a durood is automatically sent upon him, and through him also send durood to Ahmadis, because the survival of Islam depends on Ahmadiyya today. There is no shadow of doubt about it. So it's not because I'm exulting on the greatness of Ahmadiyyat in any other way, but I'm exulting in the greatness of Ahmadiyyat in the service and humble services it is rendering to the cause of Islam and to the supremacy of the message of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So pray for Hazrat Masih Maud and also for Hazrat Masih Maud al in general and al in particular as well. Like when you send durood upon Hazrat and his al, you send durood not only on his spiritual al, but also on his physical al. Because if you love a person, if somebody is your benefactor, you are bound to love his issues, his children, his family. And it's a natural phenomenon, a phenomenon which is a sign of truth of your love. So it's impossible for you not to remember Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam's progeny when you send durood upon him. If you are a true lover of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam and you are mindful of your gratitude to Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you would automatically turn to his al, in not only in spiritual form alone, but also in blood relationship as well. So also remember the al of Hazrat Masih Maud in spiritual relationship as well as in blood. And let's hope and pray that the grave responsibilities which have been endowed upon us, which have been placed on our humble shoulders, we may be able to fulfill them beyond our capacities, So let's pray that Allah may increase and broaden our capacities as we fulfill one boundary of our capacity, one enclosure of our capacity. May Allah increase our capacities to a second, larger, bigger circle, and let's move on and on until the increasing, ever increasing circles that are Madiyat engulf the entire world. Let's join in a short prayer now. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد وبارك على Ameen. Now, before parting, I must remind you that I have been praying for all of you for the great kindness you have shown to me at the hour of my personal loss, in the hour of my personal loss. That I owed this prayer to you, so I did not mention it in the list of my prayer, but I especially remembered all of you for this kindness. Throughout the illness of my disease, you have been a means of immense support, spiritual support to me throughout the world. Some of you are present, and many, the most of you, could not make it to attend the funeral prayer. But I know their sentiments, I know their prayers, they're always in my mind and my thought. And I am immensely grateful to you. You can't imagine how grateful I am to you. Many of you have come from far off places, long distances, only to be of solace to me, to give support to me. And those who could not make it, I also remember them in prayer, and I know how they feel. We are one, we're inseparably one. In Ahmadiyyat, a sort of unity of God is being manifested as nowhere else in the world. It only happened once before at the time of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's manifesting itself now. So I am so grateful to you. You can't imagine. Words fail me to express my gratitude. You have been of such immense support to the time of this crisis. Your prayers, your messages of love, your messages of help, your cries which I could hear from far off, from east and west, all alike. You are the symbol of unity of God. May Allah, this symbol, survive and become stronger and stronger, because like the prayer of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this Ahmadiyya situation reminds me of that last prayer of Badr, that special prayer of Badr. Allahumma in alakta hazil ibadata. لن يعبد في الأرض لن تعبد في الأرض أبدا هذه الإصابة لن تعبد في الأرض أبدا. Oh Allah, if you let this body of people be destroyed, then you will never be worshipped on earth again. You are the same people again, born with the blessing of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And this unity is felt so deeply by me because in my heart, this unity is intensely concentrated. At every hour of trial, I see the expression of this unity in the visible forms, like I witnessed during my personal crisis, and I was never alone. Neither left by God ever alone, nor by you. We are one and the same thing. And on us depends the survival of the universe. If we survive, the unity of God would survive. We are those people who are meant to be created by Allah. Let's spread out. Let's pay more attention to the responsibility of preaching. This issue I have been taking up for the last so many years, and still I can't find words enough to make you realize how important it is. The survival of the whole world depends on this. The very purpose of the universe, the creation of the universe, depends on you. Ahmadis, you. And you must realize this responsibility and wake up and transform yourself into such productive preachers as will transform the face of the earth. May Allah bless you, and may I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the kindness you have shown to me, to my family, to my wife in illness, and to my wife in death by your prayers. Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.